Recording is in progress.
Okay, so thank you very much, Andrew. So we are here at the Indigenous Global Unity Summit, week 62. For this week, we have our guest speaker, Umar Adamu, who is with us from Ghana. Because he is connected all the way from Ghana, we will be letting him do his presentation first. So because tomorrow is International Youth Day and Umar is actually hosting an event tomorrow as well, we want him to be able to introduce what he is doing in Ghana, and also to have him introduce a little bit more about the program that he will be doing. But during these events, I also do like to do, before anything else, is a land acknowledgement. And just give me a second to get this in front of me. We like to say first to acknowledge those who came before us on this land. We begin today by acknowledging that we walk upon the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples, and we recognize their history, spirituality, culture, and stewardship of the land. We're grateful to all Indigenous groups for their commitment to protect the land and its resources, and we're committed to reconciliation, partnership, and enhanced understanding. We acknowledge the land we're meeting on here in the Greater Toronto Area is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Wendat, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe peoples, and is now home to many diverse peoples. We also like to acknowledge the land we're on here is at the meeting place of two treaties, the lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit and those of the First Nations of the Williams Treaty. We thank them and other Indigenous peoples for sharing this land with us. We also acknowledge and recognize all of the world's Indigenous peoples as stewards of Mother Earth. I also like to say at the beginning of these sessions, Sawubona, which means I see you, I see myself in you, I see your hopes, your dreams, and your struggles. I also see your ancestors as well, because interconnectedness does not end with two people who are greeting each other. It extends to include the ancestors. All beings and Mother Nature are interconnected, and there is no sense of being separate. I see myself in all beings, and therefore, if I harm other beings or Mother Nature, it translates into harming myself. But before I get going, I usually do events coming up, but I will defer that until a little bit after Umar has a chance to tell us about the important event that is coming up tomorrow, International Youth Day. So what I'm going to do, I do see in the notes that he gave me, unfortunately, Umar has indicated that he does not have a PowerPoint for us today. He wasn't able to access the software over the interim as he was trying to put together his presentation. But I will let Umar introduce himself and his theme for International Youth Day 2022. Umar, would you like to go ahead? If you can just unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. My name is Umar Adam from Ghana, and currently I'm the Executive Director of Center for Muslim Youth Peace and Development, and a member of National Youth Authority of Ghana and the Peace Council of Ghana, and the Vice President of Ghana UnityNet chapter. And I'm a youth activist in Ghana. Currently, I'm part of the formulation of a youth policy of Ghana and African Youth Charter and the African Peace Charter too, which to promote peace and coexistence in the community where that we find ourselves. And moreover, this year's theme of the National Youth Authority is to promote and coordinate youth activity with the aged persons in the community. that will promote youth to engage with the aged persons, with the elderly persons. So United Nations, in their wisdom, trying to augment the youth and the elderly persons. This is the first of its kind by the UN, that we the youth are the intermediators in the community. We are the adults, we are between the children and the elders. And when you look at the structure, the structure of the youth in the world, which the UN defined the youth charter, that's a youth from 15 to 35. That's the African charter of the youth, and the European charter, which was being identified from 15 to 35. And in the wisdom of the UN, they thought that the African economy is not in the support of the youth. So before the youth would mature to at its age, is supposed to obtain an age of 35 years. That's when the youth can be well infrastructured, developed, and well economically and socially developed. So at age of 35, African youth is well abreast to the world. So but as compared to Europe and America and Canada, which at the age of 25, the living standard there is well abreast to the society. Not as compared to Africa, when you are aging, your age will determine your economic strata. So in the wisdom of the UN, they consider Africa to be 35, and Europe and America and Canada and other developing countries should be from 15 to 25. So that is how it's being structured. And this year's team come with a lot of understanding with the youths. And because of the attitudes and the moral issues of the youth, which is supposed to support the activities, in their mind, the world is a world of aging. In the man, yes, my voice on. Hello, can you hear me currently? Hello.
You're a little bit broken up, but for the most part, right now you're okay.
Can you hear me now? Hello.
Yes, it would be good. It would be good if you weren't moving, perhaps because you are moving.
Okay, so
Your cell phone might be switching towers or something.
Yes, I'll be in my office. I'll be in my office within 2 minutes. I'll be in my office within 2 minutes. So, but let me give the highlights about the youth, the African youth and the global youth. So, as I indicate to you, the UN has identified the African youth to be from 15 to 35, and the Europeans and the American and Canada, the youth to be 15 to 35, 25, which come with the understanding of the economic situation of the youth in Africa as compared to the standard living of the youth in Europe and America. So we in Africa, due to our educational standard, before a youth can get to the level of economic achievement, you should get some certain educational level. So by the time you finish school, you obtain the age of 30 years. That's your first degree. So there's a research show that more than average of a youth in Africa have 30 years before they obtain their first degree. And when they obtain their first degree, it becomes they have to serve for 1 year for the national service. So by the time they come out to the world, they have an age of 33, 34. So the UN and Africa Charter came out with a full understanding that it should be 35 in the standard. But compared to the Europe and American, which have the good standard of living, that support the youth, that promotes the living standard, the economic is well known. So in nutshell, tomorrow's program, that to focus on the youth and the aged. That to focus on the youth and the, I said yes, tomorrow's dates to augment or to mingle the youth and the aged, to understand that one day the youth will get to that level of aged or the elderly persons. So, and there's a certain point that is being identified at UN and the youth. And the UN has understand the youth to support the system of UN at age of 25 years. That's when it been promotes the youth to engage in a UN activity. But in Africa, elderly persons are the whole term of affairs, which make a lot of in its activity. Now, the theme of the UN program, which it has been identified, what make the youth
So unfortunately, we seem to have lost Umar. From what I got though, from what I could hear in his presentation, he said we need, or the focus of tomorrow's program is to mingle the youth and the aged, elderly people. So we need to get the youth to understand that they will be aged eventually as well. They will grow up, they will get old. And then he said also we need the UN to understand the youth and to have them support the system of the UN in turn. And then that needs to be done by the age of 25. And that we need to promote the youth and to engage in UN activities by at least that age of 25, where the definition, of course, of youth in the UN system is up to 35. So at least for those 10 years between 25 and 35, young people should be really involving themselves in the UN activities. And I think that is what he's promoting. He said something about the chief of the UN needing to understand what makes the youth. And then I think at that point it was cut off and I didn't get what he was trying to say. But I would actually encourage everybody, of course, to attend his event tomorrow. Hopefully he'll be able to come back on the line with us to finish his statements. But I think what he's saying is really important for us to understand as we develop, especially I'm glad to see Stephanie here, as we develop this Unity Garden learning programs and the quote unquote curriculums, which I know that you have stated before, Stephanie, that you don't really believe in sort of set curriculums, and it should be far more focused on play and free expression of interests of the children so they can understand and learn for themselves, but together with others about what is their real interest in life in terms of passions. And so I think that's important what he's saying as well, though, to expose children to this UN system and the programs we're doing. I think by having these events all aligned with these UN days, the recognized days of the United Nations, is one way of doing that. So we say, look, we're going to have a bubble fun festival on this day because it is this, and we will have a tea diplomacy initiative event on this day because of this. And so to recognize these days, and even have more days in the calendar that we can contribute to the learning is something that where we hopefully we can align with Umar. Umar is also part of our Global Unity Network, of course. And in Ghana, we want him to be able to especially bridge the divide between Christians and Muslims as well. He is a member of the networks that will allow us to do that. So since Umar is not on our WhatsApp
Lloyd,
group at this time.
I wanted to say something about what Umar was talking about, not only from the Learning Unity Network that I so passionately believe in, but as you talked about, one of my degrees in play and community outreach, and much of my life has been spent programming and learning with intergenerational communities and bringing especially together the youth and the elders for so many reasons. I'm sure Umar was going to talk about, and I'm glad the United Nations, a leading body, is recognizing the importance of this opportunity for these two groups in particular to come together. Of course, our society compartmentalizes and often doesn't give much regard or care or social interaction with the elders. And there's so much to learn from them. In particular, for Unity, the Unity Network International, focusing on the most impoverished people around the world for food security, Maui Aloha Project, Eco Village Initiative is about, housing and all kind of regenerative well-being practices to, these groups are about starting to walk the walk that we should be walking for the well-being, social, emotional, physical, everything of the planet and its inhabitants. I'm really grateful to have Umar as part of our growing network of people around the world to speak to this specific thing of the benefits of the youth with the elders and the benefits for the elders with the youth and the larger community. This is crucial. It's crucial for learning food systems that are sustainable and regenerative. For it's the elders who know the systems that have worked since the beginning of time, since before technology and the industrial age and our modern ways that really unfortunately are depleting the earth, and the quality of the nutrition is poor, and children in schools do not learn food systems learning at all. They don't know how to, and neither do community members at large in developed countries nor developing countries. And at the very basis, the children of tomorrow, the generations of tomorrow, need to know from seed to table how to be involved in successful food systems, because these children and these youth will become the leaders of their communities and their households. And we have to come up with better ways of doing things. And this will empower women and community members to uplift their communities, to uplift the children and the youth into their communities, so that everyone can have enough food and, God willing, enough housing and enough social interaction, but enough food in all the corners of the world. I know that even in Toronto, Canada, today on the news, They were talking about how, you know, and we've got so much wealth and so much sophistication, we believe, here in Canada, but how people are being turned away from the homeless shelters. And they're saying in the next 2 years that 25% of the people in this region believe they're going to be house insecure. And we know all over the world, and especially with our UnityNet Africa team, how this is just part of everyday life for so many people, not having enough, and not having enough of a house, roof over their head, not having enough of food, and not having enough of safety, and so many things, and for generations and decades now. So that's, I do appreciate Umar and his message, and we have to learn from the elders. And the Indigenous elders of the world not only knew how to sustain and regenerate ourselves on the land, they also knew how to sustain and regenerate the communities, community conflict, community issues for well-being, how to come together in dance and song, and how to come together regularly and live and be immersed with multiple generations. And we've lost that. The more sophisticated we get, the more we live in our silos as a single, as two people, not much as extended families. And the extended children and youth, you can never have too many people to love you, too many guardians to love you. And especially for the children. And I know that one of the biggest things that I talk about is the mental health crisis for children and youth globally. And it cuts through all demographics and geographics. I believe that if the multi-generational, and if the elders were involved en masse, it would be the old way. It's like so many people remember the old days. I believe that the children would have a chance of having better mental health and wellness.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I mean, just look at the reaction of most children when they visit their grandparents. They love their grandparents. There's something special about that bond between grandchild and their grandparents.
Yeah.
So what I would like to do, I see Lisa Anise has her hand up, but I'm also want to follow that up. This is a little bit of a free flow session today, I think. Given that we have different people on the line, and actually there was a video this morning posted to the UNAD group that I'm hoping to play for everybody as well. So let's first go to Lisa Anise because she has her hand up and I think she would like to say something.
I simply want to address and of course give my vote 2 thumbs up to exactly what Stephanie is saying here. In speaking with all these providers on the ground, the CBOs, NGOs, and educators in permaculture, culture, and agroforestry, the first thing that we all talk about is education, and not just of the land and its care, in order to reduce food anxieties and restore water to the soil, but also in terms of getting people to agree. The best method I have found for doing this is cultural education, sharing the stories, bringing forth the shows in the dance and the art, so that people can each on their own recognize themselves in what they see. And through that, plant the seeds of understanding even before discussions start. I just came off a meeting with a group in the Congo, the DRC, and they asked me that our youth is going back to school in September. What can we start right now? And I said to them, get together your cultural groups or cultural educators, have them come together and have a little festival in order to be able to use this to introduce the other educational programs. Because of course, agriculture, agroforestry, permaculture, and cultural education are 3 of the 4 parts of the structure that we wish to put together on the ground and build this from the ground up. And of course, as we do this, that cultural education, what it does is, well, to put it very bluntly, culture is the very identity of man. It is what gives him roots, a tie-in to who he is with both his past and with regard to his future. Without cultural education, we become disjointed, depressed, separated by many other means, class, color, level of education that we achieve, all these methods of divide and rule that many of the capitalist countries have been practicing for millennia. And we know that in the long run, what this leads to is depression, alcohol, drug abuse, criminal activity at very young ages, and eventually civil war because of the violence that ensues from all these people who are so disjointed and disconnected from each other. And I agree completely with Stephanie, the forms of play. These are all educational as well, because sitting in a classroom, looking at a board is one small, narrow means of educating. With over 105 different types of stimulation of learning in the brain, sitting in a chair and looking at a board or looking at a screen only can stimulate 6 to 7 of those 105 different methods of stimuli. That leaves out a huge section of our society. Those who cannot sit for long periods of time, those who fidget too much because their body tells them, I want to move, I want to do. Educational methods that employ all sections of the brain are highly desirable, especially for those who society labels as having learning disabilities. Ultimately, what I've found in my work with the learning disabled is it's not a learning disability. It's an expanded need to get learning stimulation, not from these 5, 6, or 7 methods, but by a lot closer to the 105 that we know exist. And movement, experience, the ability to take risks, learning what risk is. These are methods that provide the greatest education of all. We have nations like Finland, which is arguably the best educational system on the planet, where the children in the schools barely are in chairs at a screen or a board for more than an hour, maybe 2 each day. The rest of it is experience, what they're doing out in the world, outside, and interactions, not just with each other, but with other things that their educational system provides, like things that are brought in from other countries that they can look at, instruments where they can play and make noise, the ability to climb trees, even fall down and scrape their knees if possible. These are all learning situations. And this type of holistic learning is incredibly important to the psyche as a whole and creates societies that work in harmony. Thank you, Stephanie, for bringing up the subject. I've been aching to say all that.
Oh yeah, Lisa. Sorry, Lloyd, you have to wait 1 more minute because
No problem. This is
thank God for you and holistic well-being. It's ignored in the schools. You know, social emotion, you know, the kids from, I'd say, under 30 years of age and under are really not doing well. I think the most important thing in school is that every child should have somebody to be with while they're eating their lunch. and every child should have someone to play with at recess, but those are things that are ignored because we only care about the English and the math mark, which are important too. But the English and the math mark, I mean, we're talking about multi-literacies, and the school system only values certain literacies, which are dominant and have been necessary to excel in our society. You know, however, I just met a 10-year-old child in Hawaii when I was there for Maui Aloha Project. And this child, it wasn't reading at a 10-year-old child's level, but she had just built a 2-story home, sturdy, that she learned to do from YouTube, because you don't necessarily have to read, you have to learn you have to know how to learn and follow instructions. And you know, part of my dissertation, I'm finishing up my doctorate at the University of Toronto, OISU, the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. And my doctorate explores disability theory and how talks to families about the experience of their child being labeled as learning disabled. And this is a deficit-based theory. It's not an ability-based way of going through life. And of course, we know this is a way to keep certain groups down and certain groups up. It's an old model, because with technology, do we need to know how to read? That's not the question I'm asking. There's different ways of communicating. If you can communicate verbally, technologically, it can be translated into writing. If you know, and there's all kinds of accessible ways. It's damaging to label. It's damaging to stigmatize, and to 20% of children all globally are labeled only just with learning disabilities, never mind behavioral disabilities, never mind physical disabilities. This labeling really affects the psyche. That's why I'm doing this particular thesis, because I believe that it can affect the psyche even until into adulthood.
Oh,
that you're told that,
by far, Stephanie. I mean, with me, you're preaching to the choir.
I know that.
Yes, I shared a room with a developmentally disabled and physically disabled sister until I left for college. And working with her, got her so she talked to Blue Street and was able to write her name. But soon after I left, the lack of interaction had her losing all those skills. And we've been able to do wonders with people with varying levels of autism spectrum disorder, which is considered a disorder when actually it's just a lack of filters between the hemispheres of the brain. Meaning that instead of 80 to 90% of information being processed through the visual cortex, you're getting information from every sense you have, and every single one of them is just as loud as all the others. And the experiential training process, the ability to play, the ability to absorb through other types of stimuli is something that builds within this type of mind what you know as logic gates, where we get quickly to those points where we can decide which one of these signals can I pay attention to get my goal. And the ultimate end of this is a vast majority of this population is actually more capable than many of the rest. But because of those capabilities and those advancements, certain governments try to keep them under control by giving them negative connotations.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad that you know so much about brain science. You know, this is what we're finding out about, that we've labeled children, for instance, who have dyslexia, that being less than, not being able to perform. Yet some of the leading global companies are hiring young people who are neurodivergent, because we know now with brain science that though we might not have strong enough skills in certain areas, it means we've got even greater skills in other areas that are vital and important and crucial for so many operations in the world. And in fact, these people who we've said are disabled actually have extraordinary gifts often. And we know that intuitively as mothers and guardians and parents and teachers, we can see that the child who we're saying might not fit in the socially constructed box of normal has extraordinary gifts to offer the world. And as you talked about Finland being an example of having a successful school system, yeah, they for sure take the kids outside a lot more, and a lot more movement. You know, there's an example in Northern Canada, in one of our territories, where children don't receive an IEP who only are being labeled as disabled. All children are evaluated as they would have been in any community for their strengths and their weaknesses. And they go forth in teaching whatever they want to teach, even if it's the current system of, you know, subjects, through the strengths. So children too often can't learn math, can, you know, and often boys, often if you take them to play basketball, they can know every statistic of every player, of the history and all the teams. There are ways to do things in a holistic fashion for learning. And, you know, so much of the mental health that I'm concerned with, and of course I have a degree in play and community, you know, design and well-being. You know, we're such a sedentary society around the world. We work, we sit, we're indoors, no fresh air, no natural light. And the kids from grade 1, if they can't sit, they're labeled that they can't sit. They should be playing outside and hanging from the trees. They should be playing with each other. We have such intolerance for each other between communities, between regions, because no one plays together. We don't throw a ball in the mix. We don't hold hands and dance. We're not singing. Our priorities are performance and success, and performance and success. And so yet a child, even from affluent backgrounds, who is successful in their school, in their academics, even in their careers, are so many of them are unhappy. The state of depression and anxiety, statistics of this of depression and anxiety, and even cutting and thoughts of suicide are rampant through all groups, regardless of socioeconomic status and all demographics. You know, there's a lack of play, there's a lack of community engagement, and bringing it back to Omar, there's a lack of interaction with our elders and our populations. We're not engaging and being grateful for life. We're not being human beings, we're being human doings. And it's too much for the kids. It's too much for them. There's too much pressure to perform.
So I'd like to, I see that Umar is back on the line. I'm hoping that he might be able to finish if he wasn't quite finished when he got cut off from his original presentation. Do you have more words to say to us, Umar? I'm just going back to my notes here, and the last thing that you said before you dropped off the line earlier. Let me go back to what I wrote. You were saying that the chief of the UN program was looking at what makes the youth, and that was the last thing that I wrote that you said before things were cut off. And just before that, just to remind you, if you need reminding, you said we need the UN to understand the youth, to support the system of the UN at the age of 25 years, and to promote the youth to engage in the UN activities. And then you were going to say something about the chief of the UN needing to know what makes the youth something. That was cut off.
Thank you very much for re-engaging me on the issue. And I'm very glad to open up to make it clear that concerning the UN engagement with the youths is one of the greatest opportunity that UN give to the youths, and it helps the youth of the world to have a lot of interaction with the elderly, because the youth psychological has their own way of thinking. When you study the global phenomenon of the youth, as if I heard the earlier speaker made it clear that the mostly who engage in a lot of this, I mean, social liability attitudes, it comes from the youth. So at that age, if you are not being given a good direction, positive thinking, positive engagements, the youth will be wayward. So this team today, tomorrow's team by the UN is the youth have to engage with the aged, with the elderly, with the wisdom of the aged persons. So, and I'm trying to give the category of the youths. As it's been said, we have the youth in school and youth out of school, youth in rural and urban center, youths who are skillful and unskillful, and educated youth and uneducated youths, able youth and disabled youths. So if you look at the standard of all social standard, the youth are being engaged. So at that age, it's better we, the youth, have to be engaged with the wisdom of the elderly. So youth,
A little bit slow
the
there, but
able youths, in mind less concentration on the youth. Can you hear me clearly now?
yeah, it was just
So the
paused,
youth in,
frozen for a minute.
I heard that in Africa or in part of my world, youth in disabled are being neglected, are not being engaged. And we have, as I indicate, we have a youth in rural and urban center. So you can see the differences. And youths who are skillful and unskillful. So, but the underlying factor is how can we engage these youths with the elderly persons, with the aged persons in the community, so that they can tap the wisdom. And the world of today is not a world of education, it's a world of information technology, the world of information. And information has taken over the educational factor that we are enjoying. So we, the youth now, are in the energy to acquire a lot of information. So the youth of today are mostly engaged in information technology. And the elderly who were not before the internet or computer, you can see most of them are trying to get to that level. So the youth in education and the youth of uneducated. So today's world, the youth are more or less in information technology than education, which is the brain under the idea in education is about information, to acquire information or to memorize information. But now it's easy for us to Google, to Bluetooth, to WhatsApp, to do a lot of things to get information, which will overtake the educational system that we are enjoying, or we enjoy, or we're being put for people to come for education. So now, and the youths are now like intermediated between the world of today and the world of yesterday and the world of today tomorrow. So what will happen the next world is determined on the capability of the youth of today. And what happened previously is just an history that the youth can obtain the information within short time. So today youth is very, very sophisticated in knowledge, information technology. So yes, tomorrow's program concerning the youth engaging with the elders it come out with a lot of framework. The framework is to import, to adopt some certain knowledge from the elderly, which they are now trying to see us with the youth, that what they learn during their educational time is different from what we are learning today. Today, within a short time, I can acquire all information that I need. It's not like yesterday, where you have to go to different libraries to make a lot of research to come out with some comprehensive information. But today, I can sit to do a lot of analysis on my table with my information, with my internet, to come out with a comprehensive information.
There's an interference.
I think,
Omar,
Umar,
we can hear you.
there's a lot of noise on your line there. Perhaps it might be the connection of your phone. Yeah, we can't really hear what you're saying. It's
You
just
can't
noisy.
hear. Oh, okay. So let me give you some.
Yeah, try turning off your video, and maybe if you turn on your audio, it might be better. Try to unmute yourself, Umar. One more time. You're still muted.
Is it okay now? Hello.
A little bit of noise, but it is coming through a little.
Okay. Let me change. Let me change.
Yeah, so well, as we move forward, I think this conversation is very useful, and I do hope that if he has not done so already, Umar will put in the links for tomorrow's event into the chat, so the other people who are either on the call today or watching will also be able to attend Umar's International Youth Day event, which is again tomorrow, and learn a little bit more details on what it is trying to convey in his message, especially I think to parents, to decision makers, and to the UN itself, and those people that are part of the future, which I think he has said in his very final remarks. It was a little bit broken up, but from what I wrote, essentially he said, we need the youth to be taken seriously in terms of they're able to get information, but they need the guidance, especially of the elderly, in terms of direction and in terms of meaning and in terms of what their reasoning is, the rationale for why they are learning certain things. So the information can be obtained very easily these days, but the rationale, I think, for why they are doing it, so the moral foundations, the morals and ethics, the purpose, the meaning, I think those are the things that those interactions with the elders can really help the youth understand. Well, why am I learning this thing? And I think that I've even had that experience as well in school, growing up in this institutional school system where you learn something, say a math equation or whatever, and you don't really understand why am I learning this thing, even though they might give a couple examples, but you don't see the relevance to sort of the real life experiences. So I think that is an important thing in terms of why you can learn some of these things even through play. And that I think is an important part of the message. I believe Umar will be conveying at tomorrow's event that he is hosting. Another group I think that would be important to interact would be another person who's part of our network, who is with a group that is focused on the elderly. Her name is Malaika, and she's in Uganda. And so her efforts at trying to uplift the elderly, I think, are important to bring her together with Umar so that they have the opportunities to have those interactions. I'm seeing right now that Andrew has his hand up.
Yes, I apologize. I have multiple events going on at the same time. But since tomorrow is International Youth Day, Juliet is very much involved with youth. I'm just wondering if she or any of our other guests would like to speak on International Youth Day. That's just my question. Thank you.
So hopefully that means Andrew may be offering some time on Andrew Networks for people like yourself, Juliet, to perhaps do some kind of presentation.
Well, actually, I'm doing multiple presentations tomorrow for a Youth Day from Ghana to the United States and around the world. But I do have time slots available. So yes, the answer is yes. If you like to take time, please schedule your time as soon as possible. Thank you.
Okay, so that, would you like to say a few things on that, Juliet? Perhaps thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, and good morning and good evening to everyone. Yes, tomorrow is a very important day, and as Prince Andrew, thank you again, Prince Andrew, for that. I'm quite involved with the youth, and I find it quite fascinating, the discussion that is happening, the one that links young people to the elderly, because that is why we've actually, maybe just as an introduction, to say that I'm the head of Jamaskater's Youth Development Program, where we've always used sports and the principles of sports to teach young people various values, including discipline, dedication, desperation to succeed, dependability. So the whole idea is to actually to get young people to start engaging and being involved in activities or in spaces that are actually counter the youth culture, because the youth culture is all about lack of discipline, lack of this, lack of that, and the interaction with the elderly, is critical, and we all recognize its importance. But unfortunately, we live in a world where young people are seen as more of value than the elderly. We have a problem where young people think they know better than the elderly, yet we know that the elderly are the resource. And the gap between the elderly, as in, let's say, the grandmothers and the youth, the problem is, I'll call it the parents who have not passed on the values, but also remember, they also didn't have something to benchmark against. So when we, in our program of Bokuk, when we are trying to get young people and children to interact with the elderly, there's always that element of saying, oh, but my mother or my father or my uncle does and says things differently from what my grandmother is saying. So children tend to want to emulate their closest generation, which would be their mother and their father. So we literally go out of our way, and that's the group that is very hard to change, because their behavior is based on the socioeconomic situations. I mean, they behave according to for survival. So what we try and do is to literally skip that generation by getting children to interact directly with the elderly, to play with the elderly, because that's the generation. The elderly have the time, they have the patience, they have the love, they have the wisdom of how to maneuver through the challenges of life. And then we find that that group, the us group, majority of us in this call now, that group that is predominantly parents, tends to be the one that we have to spend more time, orientating. But in our programs, we are then saying, you know what, let's get the kids, let's get the youth to go straight to the grandparents. Because, I mean, if I sit here, I will possibly manage my 8-year-old based on the time I have available. Unlike when he goes to his grandmother, who will, all that she will do is just spend time with him. So the wisdom, there's a whole lot to say on this topic, and just the appreciation of the fact that young people's, young people, they're not just the future, but currently what is happening even in South Africa, all the socio-economic challenges and the uprisings, everything else. I mean, where we are as a country, we are not here because of Mandela. We are not here because of Desmond Tutu. We are here because of young people who were in the school uniform, stood up and said, we are going to make sure that change happens. And the change that happened 40, 50 years ago resulted to us having a democracy that we are celebrating. So the role of young people is critical in life in general. And I was glad when Stephanie and Lisa Ann spoke about the issue of nurturing children at a very young age. That's why we have that program called Tots and Kids, because there's a particular age. You see, when you say youth, we normally tend to think of teenagers and older. But we've got for the type of teenager you have, or the type of young person you have, is determined by the exposure of the child that they had at an early age, literally from the age of 2. From the age of 5, their values are already inculcated. Now we have to change. So when we say youth, we must think as youth as from the moment that children have to learn. So it's quite broad, it's a broad spectrum. And what we try and expose children to is the element of self-knowledge. We normally, our academic situation, schools and academic environment tends to want children to think about what they want to do in future when it's almost too late. That time a child is already doing what they're exposed to or they think is what is popular. They want to be a doctor, they want to be an engineer. That time that child is totally creative. So they start choosing courses based on the pressure or what is the norm out there, rather than doing according to or choosing school and career options based on their personality. Obviously, the problem is our education system. And what we do in our program is to spend time. We use toys, we use activities, play, we use interaction. I mean, there's some children who are just, by looking at them, and by how they perform, this one is going to be an artist. This one is going to be in communication. And when you identify those things at an early stage, we're talking 10-year-olds, 8-year-olds, you're able to channel them and expose them based on their personality, because you know that the school is not doing that. The school is interested in maths, they're interested in science, they're not interested in the young person or in the child as who they are, because we are all born with gifts, we are all born differently. So what we are discussing now, I mean, it touches the core of what I do. And it becomes sad that when they're at the stage of being youth, they are now working for survival. They just want any job as long as they can get income. Because when they are youth, that means they are mothers themselves. They become that problematic group that is now just living for survival. So, and I'm calling it problematic in the sense that they don't no longer focus on who they are, on their passion. The system has messed them up so much that all they're doing now is, okay, how do I put the next a loaf of bread on the table? How do I buy the next car? So it's no longer about their passion. It's no longer about what they could do. And most of the time it's also too late. So it's we are dealing with, it's an intergenerational problem, but there's also intergenerational opportunities, especially when we go back to Bokuku, because Bokuku become the buffer. I mean, personally, I was raised by grandparents. And one of the lines that my grandmother used to say is, as long as you are happy, that was her line. I mean, as long as you are happy, it's only later in life that actually that informed a lot of things about the choices that are made, choices in relationship, choices in corporate, as in happiness matters rather than reputation and what society says, rather than, rather than achieving material results. Because you'd say material things you can always get, but are you happy? You see, so that gap, and that's why I'm also excited about the project, though I haven't been able to engage because of what is happening, the school project, the sister school project that we always speak about, because it will serve that purpose to say, okay, children go to school for mainstream academic, and we can't change the governments at this stage. But what we can do, instead of waiting, let's counteract the damage that they're doing. I mean, my son, my 8-year-old, this is the last thing I'm going to say. My 8-year-old, he gets distinctions in mathematics. He will get 82%, 90% in mathematics. But he's terrible in language. I mean, as much as we speak English in the house, he will go and get 50% in English, or there's a time where he used to get less than that. So he's even attending additional classes for English. But he will sit on a computer and figure out the keyboard. He will work out the programming. He will tell you how the gaming system, he knows the networks, and he's only 8 years old. But the schooling system will judge him on the basis that he gets 40 or 50% in English. Yet they will ignore the fact that he gets 95% in mathematics. So they will focus more as an, he has a challenge. No, he doesn't have a challenge. The school has a challenge in accommodating him. So as a parent, I'm now channeling him towards coding. I'm now channeling him to anything to do with engineering, technology, ICT. So, but now as an informed parent, I can do that. But imagine how many other young people don't get that. And that is why you have high suicide rate, because these problems, they hurt young people because they don't fit in, they get frustrated, and not only do they become failures, or even if they're successful, they end up taking their own lives because they think there's something wrong with them because they don't fit in the system. So whatever we do as organizations, what Uma is doing, what Stephanie is doing, what we are trying to do, what Lisa N is doing, all that, we must recognize that it's an urgent and priority area in life, or else we are going to have young people who will have the next generation of people, of adults, who will be trigger happy because they are frustrated by what happened to them when they were kids. I mean, if you can go back, whether you go back to Hitler or you go back to other people, I'm not going to mention names because those ones are still alive and they know where I live. If you go back to how a lot of people are behaving now, political leaders, the people who are throwing bombs, and you look at how they were as children, you then realize that whether they were in South Korea or in whatever country, you realize that it has a lot to do with the type of children that they were and the type of youth that they became. That informs the type of leaders and adults that they are. And the problem we have now, we're now, as a whole world, we are facing the consequences of those problems. But we have so many programs for young people, but we are facing serious challenges. As soon as they are youth and we have not done the groundwork, it's even hard to get them to realize that you can wait for the right thing rather than jumping into the wrong thing just for surviving. Or it's even hard to tell them, save your money. It's hard to tell them, you cannot start telling the 10 commandments to a young person when you didn't tell them when they were a child. It's a very important topic and very, very close to my heart. Yeah, and I think everybody, and I was watching the South African parliamentary session today, and everyone was talking there. The members of parliament there, they were giving a discussion around the issues of the violence in the mine, in the dump, the old mines, unused mines, that whole situation that's happening currently. And these are people in their 60s, 70s, and I'm thinking, we have leaders who they're actually even out of touch because they're not involved in, one of the reasons I get involved in the programs, I go and I go and march, and I get involved in the programs of young people, is because the only way you'll understand those dynamics is by being part of what is happening rather than talking down on them. You know, I will put on my techies, I will get involved in sports, I will hang around with them. That I must not be seen as an authoritarian, but that I must also understand their dynamics and where they come from. And there's a lot of psychosocial problems. Young people need counseling. So whatever is happening here, they have intergenerational problems. They've carried the problems of their parents. Because if 70% of the Black children in South Africa or they don't have present fathers, imagine what that has done to their psyche. And imagine the challenges that the mothers have had to raise those type of children. So they are carrying that burden. And then what you then have, that's why you need the wisdom of the elderly, who are able to nurture and mold those children in spite of that circumstance. So we have a lot of work to do, and I'm totally, and this applies to young people all over the world. It's said that the ones who are in the more vulnerable and volatile situations, they end up in drugs, they get involved in violence, or they become the victims of everything else that happens. You know, the Nyaupi smokers that we spoke about a couple of months ago, predominantly the dominance of them is young people, very intelligent. You speak to them, they'll tell you about science, they speak to you, but they must have been classified as failures, or they were not given opportunities to explore how to live. Hendrik always talks about livability. Hendrik, livability also means being able to live with yourself, being able to say, okay, I am so-and-so, this is what I'm passionate, I'm an artist, therefore I don't have to aspire to live the life of someone who was born into a family of multi-billionaires. I will appreciate the art that I make or the dance that I do. So livability is not only external, it also starts internally. I mean, I have my younger brother at the age of 28 took his own life because he was totally misunderstood. He was an extreme artist. He was excellent. They even had a hall named after him at his School of Art. And then he moved to a particular part of the country where everyone else, their parents were involved in politics, so they were doing well as an administrative. And he was totally frustrated. As brilliant as he was put in an environment where he was judged based on the socioeconomic status of people, of young people who come from parents who were politicians. So he was classified as a failure as much as he was the most brilliant artist ever. And that made him take the worst decision, worst for us and for him, unfortunately. You know, that's something that he knows the space that he was in. But what that means, examples like those, personal and broad and national and locally, says to me, the minute we misunderstand young people, we're not only committing suicide for our nation and our country and our world, we're actually moving them to spiritual, emotional, psychological, and at times physiological suicide. And it is how we approach this issue, and it cannot be taken lightly, because whether we're dealing with women, how young women accept abuse, it's based on how they were raised as children and youth, how young men perpetrate abuse. It's informed by these things we're talking about. So dealing with issues of youth and children is a total, global, and holistic, and touches every aspect of our lives. As you can hear, this is very close to my heart, and these are things that keep me going. And I just say that let's just be encouraged, and these discussions, they help, because it can be, we're working with a constituency that doesn't even understand the need for these discussions. We are having these discussions and they are feeling misunderstood. So the work that we do is also keeping us going so that we can have the strength to carry that constituency from children to youth into adulthood.
Thank you, Juliet. That was
Thank you very much.
very, very in-depth. And I think this is a conversation today where we will go into depth into these issues, because this is intended to be a discussion about the International Youth Day, which is, of course, tomorrow. But I wanted to mention before I forget, because I do tend to forget things I wanted to say, but as you mentioned, My experience actually personally is also with the families in Asia, because I did a lot of travel for my work in previous years in Asia, especially in Taiwan. And one of the things they do there, I think that is unique and could partially explain some of the success of their society as a whole, is it's actually has a lot to do with architecture and the way they build their cities, where they build their homes with 3 levels or 4 levels of housing, and all the homes are touching each other and all on the streets right beside each other, not a gap between any of the buildings. But every home, the first floor is sort of utilitarian, the second floor is one family, the third floor is another family, the fourth floor is another family. Each generation, they're all living together. Just the different floors of the same house have all the generations, and they look after each other, and they're all together. The whole family, every generation is in that one domicile, and they look after each other, and they take care of each other, and they're all together in these communities of people that are living together and working together and seeing each other every day. These are very close-knit communities that are created. So it's not as if, like here in North America, for instance, where the young people, they don't stay at home. They leave the home, they go buy their own house, and they're far away. The culture in Asia is very much really rooted in those families, and they stay together, and they typically live in those buildings on the different floors in the same house, and they have the interactions between the generations. And I found it much more common as well, just generally in the culture, that the young people are interacting much more with the elderly.
And that is the original African culture. That is why all the homes, are not generally acceptable, but that is the original African culture. But
Yes,
we have to counteract.
thank you so much, Juliet. Lloyd, we have a couple of new people that are here. I don't know who they are, but if they would like to introduce themselves, perhaps now would be the time to do that. Of course, Heinrich is always here, so I'm not sure if now would be a good segue time, but the ball's in your court, Lloyd.
Okay, so we do have a slightly different agenda today. We're not going through the typical introductory presentation. I think we're already more than an hour in. So it'd be good if we can have some additional introductions. We've heard from Stephanie, we've heard from Juliet. Perhaps Heinrich could introduce himself and say a few words. We've also heard from Lisa Anise, and then after Heinrich introduces himself, we'll hopefully have Roderick and Michael also introduce themselves as well to everybody that's on the call.
Hello from South Africa, van 'n Bouwpark, the Witwatersrand watershed next to the Vaal River. I think that we are grappling with very complex matters on all fronts. It's like painting on an active canvas. Every stroke that you make sort of turns into 3 dimensions, and it's very difficult to come up with tailor-made solutions. If you take cultures like in Japan, a young manager in Japan, first introduction to management is that he must make sure that his people go home and don't work for 24 hours. In other cultures in the world, the first thing that the manager learns is make sure that your people come to work. And all these different cultures molded into one in this global village that we are working with today. Take Africa. We've got the Russians, we've got the Chinese, we've got the Americans. Everybody is trying to get a foothold and in some way want to add to the equation. And I think sometimes by stirring the pot in all these directions, we don't get the end results that we are looking for. You know, if we go back in history, I don't know if you ever heard of the guy called Thomas Mitchley Jr. He was the American engineer that came up with the leaded gasoline. You know, and I think he was highly praised in those days to come up with this additive to fuel that makes the internal combustion engine so much successful. But in the end of the day, what did it lead to? I mean, global warming and all those things contributed to this type of fuel, the pollutions that we ended up. So, you know, some group of people thought that, you know, this is a very good development, while at the end of the day, unfortunately, the same engineer came up with the chlorofluorocarbons that we've used in the refrigeration system. And I mean, that was one of the biggest culprits to global warming and depleting the ozone layer and things. So, you know, even if we look at, if you go back to engineering over time and you ask people what's engineering, if you ask Noah when he was building the ark, what is engineering? You know, he would probably describe something like carpentry or something like that. Today, in today's environment, where we are dealing with Industry 4.0 engineering and suddenly artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, additive manufacturing. And so the picture is that canvas that we are busy trying to put our picture on is changing so rapidly. And on the one side, the human being wants to be a human being. You want to be a kid, like I think Stephanie said, that throwing the balls, you know, and somehow we are taking away the opportunity in some way or another from these young people to be young human beings. They are putting in this sausage machine, and they must come out all the same on the other side and make the same noises and the same everything, because that is what's going to work in the world that we are creating for everybody. And it's high time that we just sit a little bit back and analyze, you know, the environment that we are in. In South Africa, Juliet have told us in the past weeks, our young people can't go out to the parks or the streets or whatever to play because mothers are afraid that something will happen to them. You know, this is a society that we are dealing with. I mean, we saw in the past weeks what happened in Sierra Leone, where, you know, it's basically a civil war that's taking place there. And unfortunately, this is the environment, the background to the vision and mission that we've got for UnityNet. This is where we need to create sustainability. This is where we need to introduce people to schemes that's going to alleviate poverty. It's going to create wealth and welfare. I've got a very simple philosophy and say that if parents have the means through a dignified job, a dignified income, they will solve the problems for their children. Or maybe not all of them, I mean, but a large part of them will actively participate in ventures and stuff to make sure that their children is going to survive in this environment. I'm a mere engineer. I'm actually venturing on a field that I'm not really trained to have any opinions on. But, you know, That's what I'm picking up, listening to my colleagues over weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Heinrich. I think your insights has actually been very, very helpful and useful, being sort of outside of the let's say the academia or whatever in terms of your perspective on this. I've actually used a lot of your own terms in developing these programs, along of course with people like Juliet and others. So, and also seeing Awo Asunye has come on the line, and so we have I think 3 people. But actually, one thing I was also thinking of doing, again, before I forget, this morning, there was a video posted to the UnityNet Africa and Diaspora group that I thought might be a good introduction in terms of why we are coming together as well to promote the regenerative solutions. It was a video actually posted by Prophet Cox. The reason I'm thinking about Prophet Cox right now and her health and wellness program, which takes place every Tuesday, is because I did also see Awo Asunye coming on the line, and they are working together to help in the wellness, healing of our communities. But I wanted to play this video for everyone. It is actually a short video of Vandana Shiva. It is about 3.5 minutes long, but I think as an interlude, I would like to play that video for everybody so that we can sort of put in a little bit of a background to what it is that we are doing here as well, because it also ties in sort of the engineering mindset, I think, that Heinrich talked about, and ties it into this wellness concept of how can we create the conditions that would allow a family member to have the time to be able to interact with their children, not just sort of survive, go into the survival mode. How can we create the abundance? And it is the creation of the abundance, I believe, that will allow people to have the time to move forward in that way.
And we do have additional people joining us too, Wade, Lloyd.
Yeah, so what I would like to do is actually play this video, and then we'll come back and have everybody that's recently come on the line to also introduce themselves. So if I can do that, that's okay. So let me just see if I can share my screen. This one. Let me know if you can see. This is a video of Vandana Shiva talking about the food system. If it works, I will play it. Oh, wait, I believe I did not share the sound. So I need to do that one more time. Share sound this time. So I wanted to play this video. I think it actually, when I saw it this morning, only about 5 minutes before this started today, I thought it was one of the most important videos I've seen in a long time. And I think it can help to inform not just the conversation we've been having around the education system, but also how to achieve the system we'd like to achieve in terms of the food security, as I noted. So let me just play this. It's again 3.5 minutes. Oops. Sorry, no sound.
I think the first thing to recognize about
Oop, a
hunger
bit of a delay.
is that today it's. I think the first thing to recognize about hunger is that today it's a rural phenomena. It's mainly in third world countries, and it's mainly among communities that are actually agricultural communities. So why are people who are growing food going hungry themselves? They're going hungry because everything they have grown has to be sold in order to pay for the costly seeds and the costly chemicals. So a high cost, chemical intensive agriculture is a recipe for hunger. Secondly, the models of agriculture that chemical farming is promoting are monocultures. Monocultures are nutritionally impoverished. The same acre of land, using biodiversity, using organic and ecological methods, could produce 5 to 10 times more nutrition than a monoculture can. So maximizing the production of commodities for international trade is directly proportionate to the decrease in nutrition availability to local communities, which is why hunger grows. If the world has to be fed, it has to be fed by growing food locally, to be used locally as the biggest proportion of the food basket. Some elements will be traded internationally, but what is traded internationally should not be staple foods. What is traded internationally should be that extra flavor of spices from India and coffee from Guatemala. That's all right. But to turn the world into a dependency on staples has nothing to do with feeding the world. It has a lot to do with controlling the food supply. The United States evolved a phrase during the Vietnam War, and the phrase was food as a weapon. The use of food as the ultimate weapon of control. And the tragedy is the growth of agribusiness in the US has gone hand in hand with the US foreign policy to deliberately create hunger locally in order to make the world dependent on food supplies through which you can then control countries and their decision-making ability. So hunger has become an instrument of war, and food responding to that artificially created hunger is an instrument of war. Peace means you grow food locally, you grow food with peace, you grow food non-violently, and the countries that are today the worst victims of hunger could be the highest producer of food. Africa has the largest land per human being, per capita. Africa is an abundant continent, and yet because of the deliberate policies, it has today been turned into a continent of hunger. India, which has the best soils, the best monsoons, the highest biodiversity, should not have any problem. We're growing enough food, and yet 70% of our children are going hungry because the economic system is robbing them of their right to food. So food production must once again be an issue of sustainability, taking care of the earth, and the human right to food must be an inalienable right. These rights cannot be ensured through a marketplace where food has become a commodity and a subject of speculation. We saw what speculation did in 2008. Food prices doubled, and the companies that control the food system doubled their profits, while riots took place in 40 countries.
So thank you. I'm hoping that everybody has seen this. I think one of the most important aspects of this particular conversation around the education system and around the ability of, especially of parents and of families to educate their young children is to have that ability to feed themselves. And there was, I think, near the beginning of the video is her statement in particular that these types of food systems we are promoting, and this is the frame here, could produce 5 to 10 times more nutrition per acre. So our monocultures, our food system now is not abundant. We can create greater abundance in our communities through the local production of these regenerative systems, the polycultures. And that alone could help to create the system of allowing families the time to spend educating and being with their family, playing with their communities. And that, I think, is an essential part, the basis for which we're trying to create these new learning programs that we'd like to deliver. So thank you. Now I'm hoping I will stop my share to open it up to some conversations around the interaction, I think, between the education, the learning programs, and the food systems we're creating. So if anybody would like to introduce themselves as well and who they are, I'm hoping we can start with Awu Asuni. If not, then perhaps, Chiemese. Dr. Tama, would you like to say some things?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I bring warm greetings to everybody on the call. I had earlier apologized for joining late. I've been trying to join. Of course, I know that it's 5 p.m. my time, but I had bad internet and I've been struggling to see how I'll be able to join the call. So I'm very sorry for joining late. Yeah. Once again, I am Dr. Chemeza Atam. I'm based in University of Nigeria, Nsukka, where I lecture in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology and also run an organization that is by name Equity Watch Initiative. And in Equity Watch Initiative, what we do is to promote gender equality and empower women and girls. We also engage men and boys, but with the intention of empowering women and girls, because of course we know how vulnerable this particular group is, especially now. We are fighting to promote women's rights. And one way we are trying to do that is to engage women in agriculture, because we believe that one of the ways we can address issues of gender-based violence is by, of course, addressing the issue of hunger. And that is particularly why I'm happy joining this group, because ever since I joined, it has always been, what do we do to stop the level of hunger in the land? What do we do to address the issue of hunger SDG 2? And of course, for me, it has a serious linkage with gender-based violence, because when there is hunger, of course, a lot of other things will follow, and women and girls are always vulnerable to those issues. So I'm happy to be here in the call. We are engaging women in vegetable farming. I've shared some of our work with the group, and I'm hoping so seriously that we can all work together to address the issue, which is a big one in Africa. So happy to be here in the call. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tama. I'm looking at the screen here, and I'm hoping that we can hear from Michael Coles. If it's possible. Thank you.
Yeah, good day. Thank you very much, Lloyd. My name is Michael. I'm speaking to you from the territory of the Musqueam people on Coast Salish Sea, is the west side of North America, also known as Turtle Island. When it comes to food sovereignty, a lot of people don't understand that food sovereignty is a personal action, meaning that you are born with the ability to grow and to know and learn how to grow. yourself and the things that are around you, i.e. plants, animals, all our relations. And so our responsibility to our food is one of the main factors that has been driven out from our knowledge of responsibility of self and community. The aspect of the system, the Babylon system, that we have created by the virtue of corporations, of giving up our responsibility as human beings to our control of our own selves to a non-being person. In any law, in any country, the corporation is recognized as a person. Human beings are a person. Any of our relations that cannot speak for themselves are not considered a person, which I find really strange. Our animal friends, our swim-ed ones, four-legged ones, winged ones in our world that we have been destroying and not paying attention to, i.e. the mass extension that we are now presently and that people seem to ignore, is also based on that same principle, responsibility to ourselves and to others. And some of my favorite singers, expression of music and that, we are forgetful in this responsibility of each other by giving up that control to the system to feed us, to clothe us, to educate us. So it's always the responsibility of somebody else and not the responsibility of the one. I don't know how many people on the call here, or they're listening, actually grow their own food. Do they have a plot of land where they live that they can grow? Do they have a pot to grow in? Most do not, because people live in the concrete jungle cities, right? Where all the food is. And as our sister was talking about, is that the ones who are going hungry are the ones in the rural areas. And so that product, that hard work that is taken from the people who do the work and then penalize them in order to make them to grow more food, i.e. what our sister was just saying about having a profit margin only enough to be able to buy the next year's seed and fertilizers. So it all stems down again to our Babylon system that we created and giving responsibility to a non-being person, i.e. a corporation. Anytime you open a corporation, you're creating another tool, another mechanism of oppression, destruction, and so forth. Now, this is a deep-rooted aspect of the philosophy of our humanity that cannot be ignored anymore. Everybody suffers from this sterile system that we created more than 2,000 years ago. Most indigenous peoples of the world have only been experiencing this onslaught of refining and retooling of the corporate mentality over the last few hundred years with the efficiency of colonialism. And so until we start building back our food systems and our systems of community, as our friend Lloyd was speaking about earlier, about keeping family close rather than going foreign to live in search of prosperity, when future prosperity is in the home, in the family, in the community. So I just wanted to bring out a well-rounded aspect of perception. It's going to be a tough job for us humans to do. We're living in unprecedented times of any culture of humanity that has ever existed. There are 7 billion people on the world. Now, that doesn't mean that the world is overpopulated. I don't subscribe to this philosophy of fear that it's overpopulated. It's just inefficient to feed and take care and sustain those people with the systems that we have in place. You could take all the population of the world and you could fit them into Canada. Not even into Canada, look at the world populations and where they live and then how much land mass they're living on. This is another distribution of humanity that has been corrupted over time with the influx of bringing people out from the responsibility of the food, direct food, and into the cities and living in the boxes that you live in your city, in your room. Everybody's living in a room, sitting in a room, talking on a computer. And so I just want to thank you very much for allowing me this time and space to bring my perspective and consciousness on this aspect. And there are simple tools to start in our own community, and it starts with our humanity. It starts with our love. It starts with our bravery. Right? Starts with our compassions. Taking care. If I have what I need in order to survive the day, then I have no fear to release the things that I can contribute to the world in that same space as an individual and as individuals. I think the connectedness of our technology and tools to be able to speak to each other is unprecedented in the times, as well as the amount of people that we have here. And it is a good thing, it is also a not so good thing as well. But we are still growing as humanity. I'm now 62 years going around this beautiful sun, rotations on Mother Earth. And the things that they taught us, trying to teach us when I was a youth, in that educational system of indoctrination and control of the mind. All the stuff they taught you, most of the stuff was wrong. Look at the Webb telescope that we have now. We can see things that we could never see before. 40 years ago, 50 years ago, they used to argue about how many planets there are, or if there's any planets or any systems outside our own systems. Is there any life in other life that exists? Well, we know life exists everywhere in our universe, because water is everywhere in our universe. And water is life, and life comes from the water. Thank you very much and have a beautiful day.
Thank you very much. These were, I think, extremely important words as well. We are, as I noted to one of my colleagues recently, just a few days ago, actually attempting to transition our economy. I've been using the words to a compassionate, collaborative, regenerative economy that leaves no one behind. But the basis for that is to restructure what are we valuing in the economy. And I think a large part of what we value right now and how we create our monetary system, the economics that we use, is based on death. It's based on fossil fuels. It's based on destructive capability of our system, war, the war machines that we've been creating. So the basis of the existing economy is based on death. And we need to create a new system of economy and monetization even, that is based on life. And this is actually the basis for the life value piece education that we do through We Energize Global Cooperation Turtle Island. And the basis of life is water. It is the living things, including us and all our relations, as you mentioned. And I think this will be the biggest transition that we can do through this dialogue we are having. Andrew, you wanted to say a few words as well.
Only that Oshwani has been here for quite some time, and we just had Sir Bailey join us. So perhaps we could have those introductions and then either open it up or close it. But Awo Oshwani, would you like to introduce yourself? And then Sir Bailey, if not.
And I believe Malika has also come on as well.
Oh, welcome, sister. Any one of you, now's that time. Or Loy, you can continue and close.
Ladies first. Good morning.
Good morning, Sir Bailey. You may as well go ahead. Awo doesn't seem to be either able to unmute herself, or perhaps she has some connection issues.
Giving thanks and praise to the creator of life and eternal life in salvation, in healing. Thank you to Brother Coles for the recognition of truth in our history and the edification of new paradigms and ideas from Brother Lloyd. Reminding us to celebrate that the joy of the Lord is our strength. That you who are on the line that have come are anointed to bring good news to the poor, to bind brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to captives and open prisons to those that are bound, because we are restorers of the waste places, repairs of the breach, and not alone. Big up to Pastor Barber, Reverend Barber, and the rest of the Poor People's Campaign.
And we would be
the arts, the music, the dance, the celebration, the joy, the remembering to raise our vibrations, and the acknowledgement that one God created the heavens declare the glory of a God that created all nations, that created all human beings, that all of us too. I like the way the young lady, she quoted, I'm gonna read just this bit and then I'll pass the mic. Thank you, Brother Lloyd. Micah 4:4. Because I truly believe the word of the Lord will last forever. The earth will be filled with the earth will be filled. The earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. The earth will be filled. The earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. Though fig trees not bloom and barns empty room, shall people do the work of the master. The earth will be filled with love. The earth will be filled with compassion. The earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. The hope of glory in you and us. But in the last days it shall come to pass that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established in the top of the mountains, and it shall be exalted above the hills, and people shall flow unto it. And many nations shall come and say, come, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord and to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For the law shall go forth of Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he shall judge among many people, and rebuke strong nations afar off, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up a sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. But they shall sit, every man under his vine and his fig tree, and none shall make them afraid. For the mouth of the Lord of hosts hath spoken it. For all people will walk, everyone in the name of his God, and we will walk in the name of the Lord, our God, forever and ever. Give thanks, keep growing, keep flowing, keep showing forth the glory of the Lord of hosts. Big up, great hosting, Brother Helferty. Always a pleasure to be in the space with UnityNet. Good to see you, Ms. Schuler. Big up, big up. Everything's good in Maui. Hey, Juliet.
Thank you, Sir Bailey. This is the messages that we do need to share. So I'm not sure if Malaika, will you be able to also say a few words? Today we have.
Thank you so much, Elder. Good evening, everyone on board. I am so happy that I've been able to log in the meeting. My name is Malaika Gabriela from Uganda. Yes, I head an aged care organization that supports and advocates for the older person, 60 years and above, and the orphan vulnerable children. And UnityNet Africa, I serve as a continental treasurer and the vice president, UnityNet Uganda chapter. I am so happy. I've been up and down. Actually, our elder, my Professor Lloyd, we've kicked off the agricultural project, and it's really hectic. I think next Thursday I'll be able to share out how we have been doing it from the beginning of the clearing of the land, and then the planting, and then everything. I think next weekend and next Thursday I'll be able to do that. And I really thank God, and I really thank everyone on board for your great support. And I believe the smart agriculture will be able, that we are practicing and we are doing it right here in Uganda, will be able to secure some food, or more than enough food, for the vulnerable that we are serving in the community. Thank you so much. In the bucket, I'm following up the meeting, and I'm so happy my network is so stable. I'll be able to conclude this meeting this evening, Elder. And good evening also, Mr. My Prince Andrew. I've heard your voice. Thank you.
So thank you, Malaika. I think it's very important as well that we connect you with the conversation that we had earlier with our guest speaker, Umar Adamo, who brought up the point that it's so important to connect our elders with our youth in this times, especially as we build these learning centers that we would like to establish. That is another thing that we are trying to move forward. Of course, are what we call the celebrating the diversity projects, where we are going to try to connect the learning institutions. Obviously, Stephanie mentioned earlier, she's with University of Toronto, but the idea is to connect all of these learning institutions in our local communities through the INAB collaboratives. So it won't just be one institution with another one institution coming together, but all of the local education and training institutions that are already existing at all levels of learning, from the youngest to the oldest in our local communities. Again, through the service organizations, hopefully as partners, organizations such as Rotary International, and perhaps also the Boys and Girls Clubs. And I know, as an example, that one of our colleagues here in Toronto, Michael Scher, who established the Indigenous Unity Network, this global Indigenous Unity Network, actually is also trying to bring on the Boy Scouts as well, or the scouting, boys and girls, to establish, and he's establishing an Indigenous Unity badge that the boys and girls can actually earn by doing local projects in their communities, including the planting of the trees of peace and reconciliation that we'd like to do in our local communities. So engaging with the youth, engaging with the elders, engaging with families in these activities like Bubble Fun Festivals and other such engagements of playing and dancing and sports, playing together, I think is the biggest thing we can do in terms of our mental health and the future of our families and our communities. Learning how to grow food together again in these ways that have been lost because of, as what Michael says, the colonial systems that have been too long been dominant in our communities. So I'd like to know if there's any last words today. It was quite a different type of conversation we've had. Awo, Sonia, are you able to perhaps close our event today with perhaps a short few words? We would love to hear from you.
Good afternoon.
There you go. Thank you so much.
I hope all is well. It's been an awesome program as usual. The words I have my parting words for today is that there is a lot going on this planet. There's a lot of good, bad, ugly, and indifference. And I love this program and these programs because we are helping people to see some truths that we otherwise won't see. You won't see this on CNN and those other letters that I won't call out. But I just want to say thank you for everybody for all the beautiful words and the eye-opening information that is helping us all. Thank you and have a blessed day.
Thank you, Owl. That's wonderful. Just simple. If you wanted to just finish up a few things, Andrew.
Can I say one thing real quick?
Yes, of course.
Of course.
Awo is a title. Oshun is my name. Oshunye is my name. It's Awo Oshunye. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Awo Oshunye. We appreciate that. Well, Stephanie, I see you. You've on video. Stephanie, any last words, thoughts from you?
Well, thanks, Andrew, always, and Lloyd, and everybody. And so good to see Sir Bailey on the call as well, and our new friends and some old friends as well. And we're putting it together. Grateful for Sir Bailey's prayer and chant and drumming to change the vibration and to really bring it into our solar plexus. And I believe that together we're really taking the steps to affect change and to really support and uplift all of the people around the world, locally and globally, and really proud to be part of this team with everybody. And thank you, Andrew, for facilitating our calls many times weekly, and look forward to visiting one day soon. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, so thanks all again for week 62 of the IGU Summit, a very different type of event today. We are moving forward and trying to establish and develop local projects, some what we call a proof of concept, pilot projects that we can do in the different communities of our network, where we can really showcase, hopefully, some of these solutions that we'd like to be able to do. And I would like to, again, talk to Michael Coles afterwards as well, to see if there are any opportunities that we may have here in Canada for demonstrating some of these solutions, especially, I think, in Indigenous communities across the land, where we can then work with the Indigenous communities of the United States and, of course, of Africa and Asia, and begin this process of transforming our learning systems to something that is regenerative. As I say, usually during these presentations, to create a compassionate, collaborative, regenerative economy that leaves no one behind. So thank you all for being on this call for, again, the 62nd week of the IGU Summit.
And for those, oops, let's see here.
You're muted, Andrew.
Multiple devices. Just a reminder, all 62 of these sessions are available on the AHIABGA Network Facebook group. That's AHIABGA Network. You can also find it under the Encounter Think Tank. That was the original group. Sir Bailey and I were among those first that participated here in Los Angeles for the Los Angeles Trade Technical College Architectural and Environmental Design Department's Professor Marcelo Oliva with the Community Think Tank and Advisory Board. So we actually launched this group, excuse me, on Facebook in December of 2014, and we've grown now from the first 5 to over 2,000 people. So please be aware that you can go there and you can share this link with others, and you can also invite them to join us. Thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to wind it up today, and we'll see you again next week. Tomorrow, International Youth Day, we will be streaming again here on this very same portal, although you'll have to register, 3 hours of the African youth in tourism. They'll be having International Youth Day celebrations tomorrow. So we look forward to your joining us, and we thank everyone for attending. And namaste to everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrew. And thanks to everybody that came on the line today. So good day.
Be well.
Namaste.
You know,